Bobby Heenan, the kingmaker of many wrestling legends, Andre the Giant, Paul Orndorff, Mr. Perfect, and many more. Not content with just managing champions, he stepped into the broadcast booth where his commentary with Gorilla Monsoon would redefine wrestling broadcasting forever. But in 2002, Bobby would face his toughest opponent. And this time, it didn't just end his career, it tragically ended his life. But before we get into that, let's first take it back to November 1st, 1944, where Raymond Louis Heenan was born. Wrestling was in Bobby's blood from the start. Splitting his youth between the gritty streets of Chicago and Indianapolis, he found his way into the business at just 17, doing whatever jobs he could find at local shows. From carrying wrestlers' bags to selling refreshments, young Bobby was learning the business from the ground up. From 1961 to 1974, Heenan worked for the World Wrestling Association. He did both wrestling and managing. During this time, he became famous for working with a team called the Blackjacks. People say he's the reason why Blackjack Lanza became one of the most hated wrestlers of that time. In 1974, Heenan left his job because of a fight about money and went to work for a different wrestling company called AWA. Some really important things happened there that would stay with him forever. This is where he started calling himself Bobby the Brain, and where other wrestlers started making fun of him by calling him Weasel. While working for AWA, Heenan helped two wrestlers, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, become tag team champions. He also created his first group of wrestlers that he managed, called the Heenan Family. This group included Bockwinkel, Stevens, Blackjack Lanza, and Bobby Duncombe Jr. In 1970, Heenan went to work for Georgia Championship Wrestling. There, he met a young wrestler named Hulk Hogan. Heenan saw something special in Hogan and called Vern Gagne at AWA, telling him to hire Hogan right away. Heenan knew Hogan would become a huge star, and he was absolutely right. Heenan stayed in Georgia less than a year before going back to AWA. His boss, Ole Anderson, had fired him even though he'd promised Heenan a job for life. This was especially tough because Heenan had moved his whole family there based on that promise. Back at AWA, Heenan kept managing Nick Bockwinkel, who was now fighting against the same Hulk Hogan that Heenan had discovered. In 1983, Heenan badly hurt his neck during a wrestling tour in Japan. He couldn't get surgery until 1995 because he didn't have health insurance before then. This injury made it hard for him to wrestle for the rest of his career. In 1984, Heenan joined WWF, where he would become most famous. He started by helping Big John Studd in his fight against Andre the Giant, even standing in Studd's corner during the very first WrestleMania. Soon after, Heenan created a new version of his wrestling group, the Heenan Family. This group grew to include many famous wrestlers like Rick Rude, Andre the Giant, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, King Kong Bundy, Paul Orndorff, Bode Rose, Mr. Perfect, and Harley Race. If you were a bad guy wrestler in WWF, you wanted Heenan speaking for you. In the mid-1980s, Heenan and his group had a big rivalry with champion Hulk Hogan. Heenan helped two of his wrestlers, King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant, fight against Hogan at WrestleMania 2 and 3. Though Heenan was mainly a manager in WWF, he did wrestle sometimes. His biggest win came at WrestleMania 4, where he and the Islanders beat the British Bulldogs and Koko B. Ware. The next year at WrestleMania 5, he lost a quick 30-second match to the Red Rooster. He also had several matches with the Ultimate Warrior, where the loser had to wear a weasel costume. Heenan usually ended up being the one forced to wear it. Heenan and Ultimate Warrior strongly disliked each other. At WrestleMania 5, Warrior slammed Heenan hard and really hurt him. Heenan thought Warrior was dangerous in the ring. Years later, Warrior made some terrible comments about Heenan that were so bad, I won't repeat them here. Today's WWE seems to have forgotten about all the awful things Warrior said back then. In 1991, Heenan stopped being a manager, but he came back when Ric Flair joined WWF. Out of all the wrestlers Heenan worked with, Flair was probably his best partner, with Rick Rude coming in second. When Flair first came to WWF, Heenan did an amazing job making him look like a real world champion. He would never stop talking about how great Flair was, and it worked perfectly. Looking back at his time in WWF, Heenan helped many wrestlers win championships. He helped Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude win the Intercontinental title. He also helped two tag teams, the Brainbusters and the team of Andre the Giant and Haku, become tag team champions. While managing wrestlers, Heenan also started doing TV commentary. Vince McMahon made a smart choice putting Heenan behind the microphone, where his quick wit and big personality could really shine. Heenan wasn't just great at helping his wrestlers cheat and managing his group, he was brilliant at commentary too. He always supported the bad guys and he made it really funny. Kids watching wanted to see someone shut him up, but grown-ups can now look back and see just how funny he really was. Heenan took over from Jesse Ventura on two TV shows, Primetime Wrestling and All-American Wrestling, where he worked with Gorilla Monsoon. Heenan and Monsoon were perfect together. Monsoon was serious and focused on the matches, while Heenan kept making jokes and supporting the bad guys. They just clicked in a way that made everything better. While many think JR and Jerry the King Lawler were the best announcing team ever, Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon were really something special. Fans would watch their shows just to hear them talk, especially since many matches featured unknown wrestlers losing to stars. Heenan had his own special way of talking about everything. He called fans humanoids and made fun of losing wrestlers by calling them ham and eggers. He always cheered when bad guys cheated and criticized the good guys. Whenever he went too far with his jokes, Gorilla would yell, "Will you stop?" at him. Their back-and-forth banter was incredibly fun to watch. You can find a lot of fun shows with Bobby Heenan on WWE Network, especially Primetime Wrestling. He was so good at entertaining people that they even made a show just for him called The Bobby Heenan Show. If you can find episodes online, they're worth watching. After leaving WWF, Heenan went to work for their rival company, WCW. He had actually planned to quit wrestling completely, but WCW offered him health insurance and fewer workdays. This was enough to convince him to keep working. His last day in WWF was December 6, 1993, on Raw. The show ended perfectly. Gorilla Monsoon got fed up with Heenan's insults and threw him out of the building. It was a fitting end to their time together, which had made millions of fans laugh. After the show, Heenan and Monsoon went back to their hotel and cried together, thinking about all their good memories. Bobby Heenan joined WCW after leaving WWF, but he faced a sad moment when his friend Gorilla Monsoon died on October 6, 1999. Even though Monsoon never worked for WCW, Heenan demanded they announce his death on their show. On October 11th's WCW Nitro, Heenan and Tony Schiavone told viewers about Monsoon's death, and Heenan said goodbye to his friend. Later, people found out that Schiavone didn't want to mention Monsoon on the show, which made Heenan angry at him. Heenan started at WCW by replacing Jesse Ventura as announcer on WCW Saturday Night, and later became the company's main commentator. When WCW created a new show called Monday Nitro in September 1995 to compete with WWF, Heenan moved there to be part of it. In 1996 at the Great American Bash, Heenan briefly went back to managing when he helped his old friends Ric Flair and Arn Anderson in a match against Steve Mongo McMichael and Kevin Green. Heenan helped trick McMichael into turning against his partner Green, which led to McMichael joining a group called the Four Horsemen. While the Horsemen weren't doing great at this time, it was fun seeing Heenan manage again. Something interesting happened in mid-1996, when Hulk Hogan shocked everyone by becoming a bad guy and joining a group called the NWO. Heenan, who had always said Hogan was no good, suddenly became a good guy on TV. He kept telling fans, "I told you so" about Hogan, reminding everyone that he'd been right about Hogan all along. He loved pointing out on TV that he'd known Hogan's true nature years before anyone else did. When WCW had shows at the Sturgis motorcycle rally with events called Hog Wild, Heenan reportedly showed up drunk to do commentary. Eric Bischoff knew Heenan would have a few drinks before work, which was more common back then. But the truth was, Heenan, like most of the wrestlers, just didn't fit in with the biker scene. He dealt with it by having a few extra drinks to get through the chaos. Eric Bischoff explained it well. Heenan was used to nice hotels and good restaurants, but at Sturgis, he was stuck in a messy place with 250,000 loud motorcycles running from early morning until late at night. There was nowhere quiet or clean to rest, and it was blazing hot. All this really got to Heenan, who was used to more comfortable surroundings. In January 2000, WCW took Heenan off Monday Nitro and pay-per-views, replacing him with Mark Madden. Though he kept working on their other show, Thunder, for a while, they eventually replaced him there too. By November 2000, WCW had let him go completely. Later, Heenan opened up about his time in WCW, saying he really didn't like working with Tony Schiavone. Their relationship was so bad that Heenan believed Schiavone was the reason Mark Madden took his spot on Nitro. Heenan didn't stay quiet about his time in WCW after leaving. He spoke openly about all his problems with the company in interviews, and he wrote about it in detail in his book. He firmly believed WCW was run the wrong way, and he wasn't afraid to say so. In his own words, Heenan said WCW felt like a zombie city. Nobody talked to each other, and there was no friendship among workers. He believed talented wrestlers like Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero never got a real chance because Eric Bischoff preferred using older stars from other companies. Heenan thought most people in WCW didn't know what they were doing. On April 1, 2001, Heenan came back to WWF for one night, joining his old friend Mean Gene Okerlund to announce a special match at WrestleMania 17. Then, in 2002, Bobby Heenan faced what would become his greatest challenge. At a time when he should have been enjoying his retirement from wrestling, doctors discovered cancer at the base of his tongue. This wasn't just a small problem. The cancer had already spread to his lymph nodes, making it even more dangerous. But just like he had taught so many wrestlers to never back down from a fight, Heenan faced this illness with remarkable courage. The treatments he had to go through were incredibly harsh on his body. Doctors performed surgery to remove part of his tongue, which alone would have been traumatic enough. But that was just the beginning. Heenan then had to endure 35 separate radiation treatments. Each session was like fighting a new opponent, slowly wearing down his body and spirit. Think about going through such intense medical procedures not just once or twice, but 35 times. It's almost unimaginable. These medical battles took a heavy toll on the man fans had known and loved. His weight dropped dramatically as the treatments made it difficult to eat. Perhaps most heartbreaking for someone known for his quick wit and sharp tongue, the treatments changed his voice. That unmistakable instrument that had entertained millions was now different. This would have been enough to break many people's spirits, but not Bobby Heenan's. Instead of hiding away from the public eye, Heenan continued to make appearances whenever he could. Even when his hair fell out from the treatments, he simply put on a bandana and kept going. In 2004, WWE honored Heenan by putting him in their Hall of Fame. His acceptance speech was very emotional. It can bring tears to the eyes of tough guys and really means a lot to fans who grew up watching him. It's worth finding and watching if you can. Heenan stayed connected to wrestling by helping induct several of his former wrestlers into the WWE Hall of Fame: Paul Orndorff, the Blackjacks, and Nick Bockwinkel. By 2004, his cancer went into remission, but the treatments had changed him a lot. He lost a lot of weight, and his voice wasn't the same anymore. In December 2009, he ended up back in the hospital. Another infection had developed in his jaw, requiring more medical treatment. It seemed like every step forward was followed by 2 steps back. As much as he fought, his body was getting tired from the constant medical battles. But an even more challenging period was about to begin. By 2010, years of fighting cancer, enduring surgeries, and battling infections had taken a heavy toll on Heenan's body. He started having serious problems with balance and strength, leading to a series of devastating falls. The first major fall happened at his home in 2010, and it was severe. He broke his hip, shoulder, and pelvis all at once. For someone already dealing with so many health issues, these injuries were especially dangerous. Just when he was starting to recover from these injuries, tragedy struck again in 2014, when another fall left him with a broken shoulder. His body, once strong enough to stand toe-to-toe with wrestling's biggest stars, was now betraying him. The worst came in 2016 when he fell once more, breaking his hip for the second time. Each fall seemed to take away more of his independence and strength. For his family, watching this happen was heart-wrenching. The man who had always been larger than life, who could command attention just by walking into a room, was now struggling with basic movement. These falls weren't just breaking bones, they were slowly breaking the spirit of one of wrestling's most resilient personalities. On September 17, 2017, Bobby Heenan passed away at age 72 when his organs failed. WWE announcer Jim Ross was the first to tell the world about Heenan's death, sharing the news on Twitter. Throughout his final years, even as health problems tried to slow him down, Bobby Heenan kept connecting with the fans who loved him. He traveled to wrestling conventions and fan events whenever he could, sharing stories and making people laugh just like he always had. He even found the strength to write 2 books, giving fans a deeper look into his amazing career and the countless memories he'd made along the way. When people think about Bobby the Brain Heenan today, they remember someone who could do it all. He wasn't just a great manager, though he was definitely that. He wasn't just a brilliant commentator, though he set the standard for everyone who came after. He was something special, a one-of-a-kind personality who could make you angry one minute and laugh out loud the next. Even when fans were booing him at the top of their lungs, they secretly loved every minute of it. Bobby Heenan's life story is like a roller coaster, filled with incredible achievements and painful struggles. From the highest points of his career, managing legendary wrestlers, creating unforgettable moments on commentary, being inducted into the Hall of Fame, to the lowest valleys of his health battles, he faced everything with remarkable spirit. His influence on professional wrestling can still be felt today, decades after his prime. The way Heenan handled both success and hardship teaches us something important about life. He showed us that it's possible to keep your sense of humor even when things get tough, to stay strong even when your body is weak, and to keep fighting even when the odds are against you. His story isn't just about wrestling. It's about facing life's challenges with courage and character. Bobby Heenan may no longer be with us, but his legacy lives on in every witty comment from a wrestling commentator, in every manager trying to talk their way out of trouble, and in the memories of millions of fans who either loved him or loved to hate him. He proved that sometimes the greatest victories in life don't happen in a wrestling ring, but in how we face our daily battles with dignity and determination. If you want to hear more amazing stories about wrestling legends, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. There are so many more incredible tales to tell, and we want you to be part of keeping these memories alive. Until our next video, remember Bobby the Brain Heenan, a true legend who showed us that brains could be just as important as brawn in the wild world of professional wrestling.